Welcome to this series of lessons on building Windows Store apps using JavaScript, as well as HTML5, CSS3, and a few other guest stars. My name is Bob Tabor, and for the last 11 years I've been creating screencast video training on my own website, www.learnvisualstudio.net, to help beginners get up to speed quickly with building .NET applications. And the team at Channel 9 invited me to present this series of lessons to demonstrate how easy and fun it is to build an entire Windows Store app from beginning to end. But this is a little bit more than just about having fun. Microsoft expects Windows 8 to be the largest developer opportunity ever. They expect millions of devices to be sold in hundreds of countries. And so if they're right, and from purely an outsider's perspective, I have every reason to believe that they will be, then there's a real opportunity here for you and me. I've owned my own company, like I said, for about 11 years now, and getting visibility to your product or service is by far one of the largest challenges for a micro business owner. But the Windows Store promises to put your app in front of thousands, tens of thousands, potentially millions of customers. And so that's enough motivation for me to take this opportunity seriously. In fact, as soon as I finish up this series of lessons, I'm back to working on a project that I hope to launch as soon as possible. But back to the matter at hand. This is a little bit different than the other fundamental series that I've created in the past for Channel 9, and I hope that you like what we've come up with. I'm really excited about it. The app that we're going to build is called the Contoso Cookbook, and the good news is that we're going to follow a hands-on lab that was presented at Windows camps around the world. These Windows camps were designed to help developers get up to speed quickly with building Windows Store apps. And through the years, I've always enjoyed turning to the hands-on labs. Whenever I was trying to learn a new technology, I love their step-by-step approach. And this one is particularly well done in my opinion. I learned enough and gained enough confidence by working my way through the hands-on lab initially to build my own Windows Store app. And while the goal is to follow the instructions in the hands-on lab, I do want us to take our time to really understand the why behind each step that we take. I mean, the lab, don't get me wrong, it gives great instructions on what to do next, but I don't want us to just blindly type in code and not really understand what we're accomplishing. I want us to dig deeper because that's where the real value comes from in this exercise. So before we get started, it's important that you're already familiar with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. And if you're not, then please put this series on the back burner for just a couple of days and head over to either one or both of the following series. You should take a look at Channel 9's HTML5 and CSS Fundamental Series for Absolute Beginners, or the Channel 9 JavaScript Fundamental Series for Absolute Beginners. I created both of those series for you, the absolute beginner, in mind. And from the total number of views and the positive comments that we've received on those videos, I know that they're a valuable resource for absolute beginners. So please make sure that you take advantage of those resources. And so then once you have a good understanding of the HTML5 syntax, the CSS3 syntax, and the JavaScript syntax, then you'll be ready to get started in this series. But let me warn you, we're going to cover many new topics very quickly, and at times the learning curve is going to seem really steep, especially at the beginning. So I would encourage you to just be patient and make sure that you understand each idea before you rush on and move on to the next. And also, one other thing before we get started here, I want to stress that if you're already an experienced software developer, or if you're no stranger to Windows Store app development, including how to use and utilize the Windows Runtime API and so forth, then there might be other resources that are better suited for your skill set, that are paced more appropriately for you. In other words, this might not be the best use of your time because I plan on taking my time making sure to leave no programmer left behind. Okay, so besides having familiarity with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, you're also going to need 3 or 4 things. First of all, you're going to need to have Windows 8 installed. That's right. You can only build Windows Store apps when running on Windows 8. And frankly, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, you're going to only get a real feel for the Windows Store app personality traits if you're actually using some of the built-in Windows Store apps, you know, like the weather app or like the sports or the news app. And so this will help you whenever you're designing your own user interactions for your own app that you hope to build at some point. Second, you're going to need Visual Studio. If you already own Visual Studio Professional 2012 or greater, then you're all set. But if you don't have the Professional Edition or greater, then you're still in luck because you can download the free version of Visual Studio. It's called Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8. In fact, that's the edition that I'm going to be using to create this video series. So if you don't already have it installed, you can download Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8 from the following URL. I'm going to go to microsoft.com/express. And that URL should always point you to the current location of the Express editions of Visual Studio. However, let's suppose that you're having a problem finding this resource or any resource that I reference throughout this series, and I will be referencing quite a bit. URLs change from time to time, so there are 2 or 3 places that I would encourage you to look first. First and foremost, you want to look at the Windows Developer Center at dev.windows.com. I have it on good authority that there will always be a link to the resources that you need to both build and learn how to build Windows Store apps at that URL. If all else fails, you can go to bing.com and you can try a search like this. And some people are not familiar with this, so bear with me for a moment. You can search Microsoft.com, the entire website of Microsoft.com, using this syntax, site:/Microsoft.com, and then whatever you're looking for. In this case, it could be Visual Studio 2012 Express. And that should get you pointed in the right direction to download and install from Microsoft's website. Now, if you're using Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8, you might see the following message after you install and run it for the very first time. And if you click on the little link that says Learn More, it's going to take you to a web page that looks like this, where you learn about the process of getting a developer license. You'll learn what a developer license is and what it allows you to do. It allows you to essentially sideload, or rather deploy your app onto other computers with a developer license for testing purposes and so on. You know what? That document does a really good job of explaining the process, so I'm just going to leave it for you to read that article on your own. One quick note, and what I want to do right off the bat is launch my Visual Studio here. If you're using Visual Studio Professional 2012, you might notice the difference in the color scheme. This dark color is the default in Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8, but these are merely cosmetic differences. You can and you should continue with this series regardless of which edition of Visual Studio that you're currently using. Now, if you want to make sure that your environment looks exactly like mine, then here's what you do. Take a look. We're going to go to Tools, Options, and on the Environment tab at the very top in the General sub-tab, you want to choose, it'll probably be light by default, you want to choose dark. And so that will change and it'll make your edition of Visual Studio look just like mine. And while I have you here, let's go on down and turn on line numbering so that during the course of this video series I can say, look on my screen at line number 20. Or if you're trying to follow along and you can't quite keep up with me and you're having a little trouble figuring out where I'm at, you can always reference that the line numbers where I'm currently typing. So we're going to turn it on for HTML, for CSS, and for the JavaScript editor. So let's start here with looks like CSS is the first one. We want to make sure that under the display that line numbers is turned on. We're going to go down to HTML and make sure that it's selected as well. And then finally JavaScript, make sure that line numbers are turned on for that as well. And click OK. All right. So let's just recap what we said just a moment ago. We said that we need several things in order to follow along with this series. We need Windows 8 installed. We need some edition of Visual Studio 2012. The third thing that you're going to need is the Contoso Cookbook Hands-On Lab. And I'm going to be referencing it often throughout this series of lessons, so you might find it helpful to use both this video series and the Hands-On Lab text. So fair warning, there might be occasions that I'm not perfectly in step with the Hands-On Lab's instructions. I might skip a step or batch them up together and do them all at one time, but I generally explain what I'm doing, and if I do take a large departure from the labs, hopefully I'll give you a good explanation as to why I'm doing that and what I'm hoping to accomplish. So you'll want to be reading along. You'll want to pause the video, read a little bit, pause the video, read a little bit. And so to download those, we want to go to this URL, which is a little bit of a shortcut, aka.ms/Windows 8 Camp in a Box, like you see on screen. And this will take you to the download location. You'll notice that there are two links. There is the C# version, the cs.setup, and then the JS setup. We want the second one, and we'll click to download, and it'll ask us, are you sure you want to do that? I've already taken the liberty of downloading this into my downloads folder, and what I'm just going to do is go ahead and double click the win8js.setup.exe file, and it asks me to accept a license, and it asks me for the destination folder. You can put it anywhere you like. I'm going to go ahead and use their recommended folder and click install, and it'll take a few moments. Alright, so after the installation is completed, it will open up the Welcome to Windows 8 Camp in a Box. You'll also notice on your desktop it'll place a hyperlink to this page, so we can always get back here from our desktop. I find that to be pretty convenient. We're going to be working in this green icon, the Hands-On Labs icon, so I'm going to click that, and you'll notice here that there are a number of hands-on labs. I'm going to talk about the taxonomy of these labs a little bit later in another lesson, but essentially we're going to be working through most of these. There's both an HTML version and a Word version. I'll be working with the HTML version. All right, and we'll come back to this in a little while, so let me go ahead and just shut this down for now. All right, so the final thing that you're going to need are the files that are associated with this series of videos. And I've already finished recording this series as I record this last video, this first video. I've got this folder on my desktop called WinAppDev_JS, and it's going to contain several additional projects that I use to illustrate some of the ideas, kind of in their own project in a sandbox, away from our main project, to kind of drive home some concept or idea that I want to talk about. Now, typically when I record a series, I would copy the project that I'm working on, in this case the Contoso Cookbook, the before and the after version, and I went down that road in the C# version. However, that made for an enormous file size for you to download with the example code, and frankly, you'd be better off just relying on the Hands-On Lab folder, which on my computer is installed on the C/Win8js as the definitive version of the code that's available. But what I want to do is give you all of the assets that you're going to need in order to complete these lessons, so you have you can keep them on your desktop and get to them very easily instead of having to navigate through their folder structure. So I'm going to go to the labs and then 00 assets.js. This will contain all of the files and folders that we'll need to follow the instructions in the labs, and I want to put them into a resources folder here in this WinAppDev.js subfolder called resources, and I'm just going to right click and copy and then paste, and so now you should have easy access to them from the desktop like I do throughout this series by just going to the resources subfolder. And you can see what I'm doing here, and I'm going to zip all this up and make this file, this WinAppDev_js.zip file, available somewhere. Hopefully it'll be available on this page where you're currently viewing this video. You just want to maybe do a Control F while you're in Internet Explorer to and search for download to find the link for this zip file. All right. So what exactly are you going to learn if you go through this entire series with me? I mean, you're going to spend, I think it's over 6.5 hours listening to me talk and working through over 100 pages of instructions in the Hands-On Lab. That's a large investment of time. So you might be asking yourself, what am I going to get from all this? What do I hope to gain from it? Well, actually, I think you're going to learn quite a bit. The Contoso Cookbook is a pretty comprehensive example of building an entire Windows Store app from beginning to end. And so what I want to do is walk through the entire application and just at a high level talk about the kinds of things that you're going to learn throughout this series. Fortunately for us, they have a finished version of this. If we were to go back and open up our Welcome to the Windows 8 Camp in a Box, and let's go to the samples and take a look at the Contoso Cookbook. We're going to look at the HTML edition, the version of it. And I'm going to double click in the source subfolder, and then I want to double click this Contoso Cookbook solution file. I'm going to go ahead and click OK to the question, are you sure you want to open this with the Express Edition? Yes, that's great. And without changing anything, I'm going to go ahead and run this app by selecting the Run on Local Machine button. I can also use F5 on my keyboard. And immediately we see this vibrant splash screen, beautiful images of food that represent recipes. We can use our mouse, or if we were working with the Microsoft Surface or some other tablet device, we could use our finger to scroll back and forth through these recipes and their groupings, like Chinese recipes, French recipes, and so on. I can navigate in and take a look at details about the Chinese recipes, see a map of China and some lorem ipsum text here on this page, but then also see, for example, the recipes that are associated with one of these, with the Chinese recipes. I can use a little back arrow with my mouse to go back to this grouped item page, and say, for example, I want to take a closer look at the fried rice recipe. I can see an image, the ingredients, the directions. I can right click and bring up a Windows 8 app bar, and I can choose to set a 15-minute reminder. I can pin this particular recipe onto the Windows Start page if I wanted to, and so now I can get directly back to the fried rice recipe if I like. I can also take a picture or take a video of the finished version of the recipe and then share it through email or through a social network. Back on this page, we can enable things like snapped view, and now we see the orientation change where we have the Contoso Cookbook on the left-hand side and then some other app running on the filled side on the right-hand side. I can, again, drill down in and see a different view, a different layout for the recipes as well as the list of items. Let's see what else we can do here. On this page, I can use semantic zoom in order to drill into or see all the categories at a higher level and then drill into and get to the Mexican recipes very quickly in the app. And so we're going to learn how to build all these features into our apps. And so throughout the course of this series, you're going to come to learn even more about JavaScript, as well as the Windows runtime environment that will essentially host our app, the Win.js library that gives functionality and these Windows personality controls, makes them available to our app. We're going to learn more about the Windows Store app templates in Visual Studio, which give you a great starting point for building these sorts of apps. And we're going to investigate the HTML5, the CSS3, and the JavaScript inside of the Grid app template so that you can interpret and modify these files on your own to build your own app. It's really pretty simple, but there are some new concepts that we didn't cover in the Fundamentals series, so I feel like we need to point some of this out, as well as some new syntax to make sure that you know what it means before we begin picking apart the template in greater detail. You're going to learn about the life cycle of a Windows Store app. In other words, we're going to learn how to respond to key moments in the execution of your app. We're going to talk about what happens when somebody switches from your app to a different app, when they select a different one from the start page and maybe select several. What happens to your app? Where does the data go? Where does the state of the application go? And we're going to work with that throughout this series of lessons. We're also going to talk about programmatically handling roaming, which allows users to move across computers and devices and continue using your app with all the data and all the state, any information that they saved, preserved from their previous session on a different device or computer. You're going to learn how to harness the various features of Windows 8 as a developer. As I mentioned a little bit ago, picking a Windows Store template in Visual Studio will give you a head start at creating a Windows Store app complete with the Windows design language and the Windows personality controls that are ready to go. It also gives you a head start in making sure the app looks good across a wide variety of device display sizes and utilizing snapping, the feature I just demonstrated a little bit ago that allows you to dock a smaller version of the app onto one side of the screen while the user is working in another app. From there, you're going to learn how to write code so that your Windows 8 app can utilize charms. So back here in our app, what if we wanted to, for example, search for a given recipe like that contains sugar? How can we make it available in our app so that we can find all of the recipes, the Italian recipes that include sugar in them, okay? Or better yet, you can define information in your app that can be shared with other apps or show up in a system-wide search. All this is made possible by implementing the appropriate contract, and we're going to be demonstrating that later on in this series as well. We're going to add integration with our computer's webcam into the Contoso Cookbook for taking photos and videos like you see right here. We demonstrated a little bit ago. And then we're going to control how our app is displayed in the Windows 8 start screen. As you can see, we've get this beautiful tile. So you might see new recipes that are available in the app. They'll begin to just display here on the tile, similar to how you see updates to the weather, the sports, the finance app, and so on in the built-in Windows apps. We're also going to build on that and add notifications and badges that update the user about the app's content. We've already seen how we can create tiles that will deep link into our app. Near the end, we're going to demonstrate how to enable a trial period in our app. So, for example, we'll go to Settings and to the About screen and allow somebody to purchase the full version of our app. And even we will demonstrate how to, let's go ahead and go to the Italian recipes, and you can see here how we're able to enable the purchase of individual recipes for like 99 cents. So in-app purchasing features, all enabled by integrating with the Windows Store API. Really cool. And finally, we're going to work on this project together. We're going to be using the Visual Studio IDE in ways that we haven't before when we were working through the JavaScript Fundamental series. And I'll also highlight a few of the newest features that have been added in the 2012 version. So once you have exposure to all of these ideas, you're going to be able to start conceiving of your own app ideas and be able to implement the idea in Visual Studio and then submit it to the Windows Store, which is ultimately our aim here. You may have already some experience or interest in some area and you want to build an app around it, or you personally have always had a need that no other apps seem to address. Well, now is your chance to build it, to make it look great, and to profit from it. And that's really exciting. It stirs up this sense of creativity in me that I haven't experienced in a long time. Okay, I want you to get the most that you possibly can out of your investment in this series of lessons. And so to do that, you need to become an active learner. And that really takes three forms. The first is that you need to follow along and, as I love to say, get your hands dirty in the code. Watching somebody else writing code is boring. You should be following along. You should be doing what I'm doing on camera. You'll begin to get insights and have questions that hopefully I'll be able to answer. And so it'll begin to feel more like you and I are having this conversation and that we're working together on this project rather than, you're just listening to some dude blather on, right? So the second thing you need to do to become an active learner is to follow along effectively. You'll need to pause, rewind, or even watch the video a second time. You can't watch a video screencast the same way that you watch a movie or a sitcom, TV show, whatever the case might be. You have to pause it. You've got to think about it. You got to rewind it. You got to type in the code yourself. That's when you begin to get the insights. Otherwise, you're going to miss things, and you're going to be like, I still don't know what's going on here, because you engaged your mind in autopilot instead of being active in the learning process. And then third, when something doesn't make sense, or I have not adequately explained myself to help you understand something well, then don't hesitate to ask questions in the comments area below. We need to make sure that you get this under your belt, so don't just sit there and be confused. Please ask. I promise if I can't answer a question, we're going to find you somebody that can answer your question. There are absolutely no dumb questions, all right? Okay, finally, as you can see, I have Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows 8 open right now. And what I'm going to do is adjust the size of the text editor to 122%, and now I'm going to zoom in the camera so that you can see the text hopefully more clearly. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm recording this video in 1280 by 720, which is a high-def 720p format. However, whenever it's hosted on Channel 9's page, it'll appear in about a third of that resolution. So if for some reason you can't read the text that is displayed on the default.html page that's opened up in Visual Studio right now, you'll either need to do one of two things. First of all, you can go full screen. That option is one of the buttons. As you hover your mouse cursor over the video that's playing right now, there is a full screen option. I believe it's like the middle of 3 buttons on the lower right hand corner. Or you're going to need to use one of the links on the right hand side of the video, and download the video to your local desktop and watch it locally. If you see garbled text and you can't read it, it could be due to how Silverlight adjusts the quality of the video based on the speed of your internet connection. It should be crystal clear. You should have no problem reading the text. So if you are having a problem, please don't sit there and suffer, and please don't complain about it in the comments. We know what the issue is. What you need to do is download and watch the video locally, okay? All right, so earlier I said that building Windows Store apps is fun, and it really is, but it can be challenging too. If you're like me, you might get a little bit discouraged when you run into roadblocks. As I was learning all this, there were moments where I felt completely overwhelmed with just the sheer amount of information that I didn't understand. So as you go through this series, please know, I totally get it. I would just encourage you at the outset to do one of a few things. First of all, whatever the roadblock, I'm going to assume that it's some concept that we cover in this series, or perhaps it's some feature that you want to implement in your app, or perhaps some code that isn't doing exactly what you expected it to do. Stare at it for a while. If I'm able to clear my mind and pinpoint, isolate where I'm getting stuck, well, that's a great start. Once I can get some clarity on exactly what it is that's tripping me up, then I start reading everything I can find on the topic. I consult Microsoft's documentation, and that often helps me realize that maybe I had a fundamental misunderstanding of a given idea. The longer I stare at a problem and chip away at it like a detective would put together clues to solve a case, inevitably I wind up figuring it out. Second, ask questions. You're not in this by yourself. There are plenty of people that are willing to help. If you search for my handle on Microsoft's forums that are dedicated to building Windows Store apps, you're going to see that I ask a lot of questions. In fact, sometimes I'm a little bit embarrassed. Sometimes they're dumb questions. But inevitably, some kind soul always comes to the rescue. And if there's something you don't understand in this series, please don't be shy. Ask questions in the comments area below the video that you're currently watching. And then third, somebody once said, genius is perseverance in disguise. I have it on a little post-it note over here in my office. I love that. Determine that you're going to stick with this. Just keep taking baby steps towards a better understanding, and then be patient with yourself. For example, this is a long video series. It'll take a serious commitment of time, but if you put in the time, I promise that you're going to be well on your way to having a strong grasp on how to build great Windows Store apps. The same's true when you're actually building the app. Commit up front that you're going to see your little project all the way through to the very end. Okay, so let me just say that I am really excited about working through this content with you. I've already created the series. I've put everything I can into it. It's really exciting stuff. We're out there on the bleeding edge building great looking apps that other people will get to enjoy. I'm looking forward to this, and I hope that you are too. So let's get started building our project beginning in the very next video. We'll see you there. Thank you.